The restoration of the £200 eBay Sega Mega-Tech is complete. Hello Cave Dwellers, yes, I'm so excited to show you this. It feels like Christmas. It's been the big push this week, the big push to get this finished, and a lot of work has gone into it. We left you on a cliffhanger. There have been 3 episodes so far of this restoration. It's been a huge team effort involving me, Holly, Richard, Dan from Retrofied, and Alex. A huge number of hours have gone into this restoration. And well, I think it speaks for itself. So I'm just going to show you what it looks like, and then I'll take you through all of the things that we've done in this last week to finish off the restoration. Here it is. Isn't that gorgeous? Both monitors you'll see are now working, and I'll take you through what we did to get that working. The artwork on the control panel and on the sides is beautiful. That side artwork has actually changed since the last episode, and I'll take you through why we had to do that. New grip down here for your feet. That's really tidied it up nicely. If I walk you around the back, we've actually got doors on the back now, which we didn't have before. All nicely painted and tidy, and these 3D printed Sega grills that we've put on the back there, custom made for the job here. It's beautiful. Who wouldn't want this in their collection? So what have we had to do to get it to this stage? Well, let's put a quieter game on, just in case that's overpowering the microphone. And we'll take you back to the day it arrived. Here it is coming out the back of the van as a reminder. Unloved, missing rear doors, a necked small monitor in the top of it, unknown condition, and over 3 episodes we worked really hard to clean it, really hard to clean it, to test it and to bring it back to life. However, with every few steps forward we had a step back, and that included, at the end of the last episode, the big monitor. We lost all colour except for blue in the big monitor. Now, we weren't too worried about this because we were getting a picture on it, so that couldn't have been too bad, right? And sure enough, it wasn't. So this was quite a quick fix, or at least for someone who knew what they were doing, and that someone is Holly, who's been working on the monitors. And to fix it, we focused down on this corner of the chassis for the monitor. There's 3 diodes down there, one for red, one for green, one for blue, and only the blue one was working. The other 2 were dead short. So Holly swapped them out, and all the colour came back to life. And I think there was also a dry joint that she spotted that needed sorting, so she reflowed that, and this is now solid once again, although it was working before, but hopefully this is solid for the long term now, and it looks brilliant. You can see a few games running here. I could actually do with getting back inside and centering it a little bit better, squashing that picture around a bit to make it look as good as possible, but you get the idea. It looks gorgeous on there. Love that. Now, the big problem came with the small monitor. When it arrived, it was necked, so we couldn't use the monitor that came with it. Took us a while, but we managed to source another one thanks to a chap named Bonehead. And no to those who commented, I don't think it's the same Bonehead who was in the band Oasis. Bonehead was an arcade collector who just happened to have a Sega Mega-Tech monitor and sold it to us. And it wasn't in working condition. For a start, the neck board was snapped in half, so we repaired that in the last episode. But it seemed that it was more than that. We couldn't get any high voltage whatsoever to run through the monitor. And well, Holly spent several days working on this, and I think it's probably best if she explains how this monitor was fixed. It's that part of the episode where I say a big thank you to PCBWay.com for supporting the channel and making projects like this possible. If you're working on your own project and you need PCB manufacturing, 3D printing, CNC work, and much more besides, then PCBWay.com is the place to go. And while you're there, make sure you check out their shared project section, which is just rammed full of projects to support vintage hardware. It's well worth a look. Thank you, PCBWay.com. So Holly, contrary to popular belief, you actually have a job. So I've caught you between jobs in the car.
In sunny Devon, indeed.
So just explain to us, we got the small monitor working. I say you got the small monitor working. And we come into it here where the high voltage is already appearing on the screen. So what did you do to get to that stage?
So to get to that stage, most monitors have what's essentially a cut-down switch mode power supply. So that one, unfortunately, had lots of issues. The primary rectifying diodes, one of them was dead. So I replaced all 4 of those. After that, I measured what's called the B+ voltage. So that's the primary high voltage coming out of that cut-down switch mode power supply. which goes off to create your HT through your frame output transformers and your flyback transformer. Now that was extremely high and fluctuating all over the place, which had caused the X-ray circuit to kick in and just shut it out.
Why do monitors have an X-ray circuit? Sounds pretty serious.
It was more serious for the earlier black and white ones because they didn't really have much protection. It's not a big deal on the modern colour ones as long as you don't bypass the protection circuits. Where if your high voltage or HT goes extremely high, above about 28,000 kilovolts, you risk those electron guns running high and actually pushing out X-rays. So that's not a good idea, and we don't want to fry our guests.
Once you've got power to it, we can see that you're then using the Mu gun to replace a few more things, a few capacitors. What's going on there?
Yeah. So when I found that the B plus voltage was too high, that's on a regulating circuit, and I found there was a primary capacitor which controls the voltage, and a clamping Zener diode. And the Zener was okay, but it had a really bad bias voltage on it. So I replaced that. I completely replaced the capacitor because it was dry. It was just not doing anything at all. And as soon as I did that, bang, we got our voltage back. It was all nice and stable. It was 38 volts. But and I think you might have got some footage. It came back, and we were able to show that the monitor worked. But then after a few minutes, we had full frame collapse where it drops down and you just have a line across the middle. That's because and a few other components, hadn't survived so well. So I traced through them. I'm not an advocate of doing a complete recap of monitors. I'll only recap where I believe they're necessary, because if we put brand new things in, A, they can be not as good quality as the originals, and B, they can put stress further down the chain and make something else go bang. So
one of those things I can see you took out was a bad resistor.
There was a bad resistor. So it wasn't bad. It was tired, hot. It's a high voltage resistor. So it was within the ballpark range, but we had it in stock. It was easy enough to replace it. And also then we had the next filter capacitor, which was for the frame transformers that replaced, and a few other input ones, not many. And then, as you can probably see, it's looking lovely. Did I enjoy it? Funny enough, I did. So these are Hantrax Polo monitors, and I've done a few of them now. And at first, I loathed them because in some ways they're not very logical, but I'm starting to love them. I'm sure that Neil's got plenty more monitors for me to look at, so I'll no doubt see you again in another video.
Thank goodness for Holly. She did a wonderful job, and you can see close up of the screen there. The burn-in that was on the tube, well, it's still on the tube, but it just vanishes because it's being used for exactly the same purpose as before. The pixels of the menu appear exactly where the burn-in was before, so you don't really notice it until it's switched off, and it does its job wonderfully, blinking away there, asking us which game we'd like to play. Both monitors then, looking wonderful. You'll notice on the bezel, the surround of the monitor, all new bolts and screws around here and here. All replaced and looking like brand new, with a little bit of patina around the credits and the coin return. You don't want to make it look too perfect. I like a few war wounds on an arcade machine. I want it to be clean so that I'm not scared to touch the thing. I want it to be functional so that I can enjoy playing on it. But I like a few scrapes and scratches here and there so that it looks like it's had a life and it's been enjoyed. And you'll notice that in a few places around the cabinet. Down here, for example, you can see where an operator must have used a screwdriver or something and rammed it in there every time they wanted to open the door. And I thought, well, I could touch that up with a bit of black paint. But I quite like it. I like that little bit of history there. Anyway, back to the restoration. The next job was to close up the holes on the back because it came with no top door and no rear door. So let me take you around the back here. I know it's the back of an arcade machine. It's probably the least interesting part of the machine. But we've put a lot of work into this, so I just want to take you through what we had to do to get it like this. So there was no rear door here, unsafe, obviously. We wanted that there. And there was no top door here, which covers up the 10-inch monitor. Extremely unsafe because you don't want hands coming over into high voltage of a monitor there. So we started with the bottom door. I got a piece of MDF from the local DIY store. This is 18 mil, yeah, 18 mil MDF, and measured it out there, ready to cut the bottom door first of all, the biggest door of them all. There I am. cutting it in the cave because, well, quite simply, it was too cold in the workshop. It's really cold at the moment, and I didn't want to work down there, so made a bit of a mess in the cave. And then I drilled 4 holes so that I could get the jigsaw in there and cut out the vent. A vent halfway up and a vent at the top. Having looked at other Mega-Techs, they don't all have the top vent, but I thought it's nice to give the 10-inch monitor up there a bit of room to breathe. There is always the risk of someone putting a drink up on the top and it falling in, but I think we'll take that risk in the name of airflow. The vents were 3D printed and designed by Richard. I think he did a wonderful job of those. Come back to those in a minute, because next up we had to paint the doors, and this is some all-in-one primer and black paint, so I could just slap it straight on to the untreated MDF. This was the treatment, this was the primer for it. And first of all, I painted the filler. You'll remember we had to fill in where there was a bit of wood that had been torn out of the back of the cabinet there. And I thought, you know what, let's just paint the whole back of the cabinet. Let's get it a nice uniform color. It's an all-in-one black primer and color, but actually when it dried, I'd say it was definitely matte, and it was slightly gray. It wasn't completely black, but I quite like that. It works well on the back of it. So I continued and painted the doors, the top cover there, getting a nice coat of paint all over it and trying to smooth it out so you don't see any of my roller marks on there. And then the same again for the main door. There's not a great deal to say about that. I'm painting something and now we're watching paint dry. So let's swiftly move on. A couple of metal brackets went at the bottom of the door. That's to help it to slot in to the cabinet itself at the bottom. Likewise for the top door. And then we drilled a couple of holes and put locks in both of them so they can be locked shut and easily removed when we need to get to servicing. The 3D printed grills, we then put a lacquer coat over. This was on Richard's recommendation. I thought they looked great as they were, but he said if you lacquer them, it will make them look a bit more like real plastic. I know it's real plastic, but I guess he means a purposefully injection molded or manufactured part. I don't know, it just gives it a nice sheen and a nice finish. I really like it. So we lacquered them and then we screwed them onto the cabinet. And that's how it came out. From a cabinet with missing doors to a cabinet that actually looks like it's loved and cared about, because it is. It does actually work. We've used the same lock on all of the doors, so one key will actually open all of them. There we go, it's a nice flush fit. Access there. Normally you would access it from the front to change the game cartridges, but we can get to the back there, and we can use the same key if we wanted to open up the top, which I won't do because it's on at the moment. So there you go, the back end of an arcade machine. Have you ever seen a better looking arcade back end? Round to the front now, for as long as my knees will allow me down here to talk to you. The rubber matting, I replaced this down here. Now in the previous episode I tried to clean it up and get it looking like new. It's always nice to try and preserve those original parts where you can, but sometimes you just have to accept defeat. And in the case of an arcade machine, it was always made to be serviced. Parts were always made to be easily replaced and changed as they got damaged and when they needed to. So I don't feel too bad about replacing something like a rubber mat. I won't spend any more time justifying my decision is what I'm trying to say, and I think it looks great. It did put up a bit of a fight though. It was very well stuck down, so I tried to remove it with a scraper. I applied some heat, and even with a heat gun, it took a lot to get that adhesive moving again. It's probably been on there since the day it was manufactured, and they wanted to make damn sure that it wasn't going to come off wherever this was installed, in a pub, in an arcade, in a seaside town, getting sand rubbed into it all day long. This is hardy stuff. So I went at it with the scraper and with the heat gun, and eventually got all of it off. I used the old rubber as a template to cut out our new piece of rubber. There it is, pretty easily done with a Stanley knife. And then to make sure that it was going to stay in place for another 40 years, I used lashings of contact adhesive. So that has to be applied all over the back of the rubber and then all over the surface that you're going to stick it to. You can't slide it around. Once it makes contact, it sticks pretty quickly. So I had to stick that down, line it up and get it nice and flush down there. Just poking around the edges with the scraper to make sure we got all of the edges in there, and then I finished it off by putting the kick plate back on, cleaned up, that's the original plate, and new screws all the way around there to give it a really nice finish. Quite how many people are going to come into the cave and go, oh, that's a wonderful piece of rubber and a nice kick plate, I don't know, but it makes all the difference to me. Come with me then, oh, I knew my knees wouldn't enjoy that, up to the control panel, the part where we actually interact with the game, probably the most important part of our whole cabinet. We've all played micros with a terrible joystick, we've all played consoles with the horrible Player 2 joypad that your friend gives you, and it changes the dynamic of the game, which is why it's so important. First of all, we've made this look glorious. We applied the new stickers in the last part, so we knew this was looking good already. The buttons that were in there were grimy, yes, we could have cleaned them up, but also the colours had faded, so I wanted to replace them with some new ones where the colour would really pop like the originals. They had cherry micro switches in them, nothing wrong with them, but I did decide to replace all of the buttons and all of the micro switches. So these are Suzo Hap, they're concave, just like the ones we're replacing. Not quite the same, not the exact same model, but close enough, I think. A standard 32mm button that goes into a 28mm hole, and they came with micro switches which were cherry, I think they're D44Xs. Got them from Arcade World. They seem to be a reputable supplier, so I was happy to buy from them. And we're going to replace all of the buttons with like-for-like colours, but they'll be brand new. Now the joysticks, those were those lovely Australian-made joysticks, which from the comments of previous episodes of this series, some of you are very fond of. They're spoken very highly of, so I wanted to keep them in here. Nothing wrong with those sticks. So I disassembled them. You can see those are the micro switches that sit inside the joystick, just the same as the button switches, but they have the addition of an arm on the top of the switch, and the joystick bumps into those arms and presses down on the micro switches. I know you guys love a cleaning montage, so here we are scrubbing away at my Australian joysticks, and they cleaned up pretty nice. The red one does have a bit of scarring on the top of the ball top, and they're not the type of ball tops that you can unscrew and replace. That's a fully molded stick, so another battle scar on the joystick there, but they feel like nice sticks. I'm happy to leave them on there. So the sticks got a good clean. I did use the micro switches that were in the sticks. They're very, very grimy, so gave them a rub down with some sandpaper to clean up those switches, and just a general clean. Took the joystick fully apart, cleaned the joystick, and also a bit of silicone grease in the joystick. Well, after we'd cleaned out the existing old muck that was in there, the old grease, and then a little rub around with some new silicone grease. And that, well, they both feel like new. Absolutely nothing wrong with those joysticks, so anyone who plays this will be happy to use those. Little details make all the difference, and there are some visible bolts on the control panel here where the joysticks are held in place. So I wanted to make sure they blended in nicely with the new artwork and looked clean. So that involved sanding them all down to get any rust off of them, and then a process of priming, quick spray of some primer here on the first coat. Let that dry. I did give it a bit of a helping hand with the hot air gun. Hit it with some black paint, and then a clear coat over the top so that that paint doesn't rub off too easily, and it's protected from the grease of hands. Then all that remained was to put all of those bits into the control panel, screw them all into place, and wire up the terminals so that we could test whether or not all of our buttons and our joystick switches were working. The Mega-Tech has a really useful test screen. You could just see it on the screen there, which allows us to press a button and see has the button registered a press. So that was really good. And then to give it a thorough test, it just so happened my good friend Mark Fix's stuff was in town, and he popped in and we had a few rounds of Streets of Rage. And in that testing, every button press, every joystick movement, they all registered, it all checked out, even under the fierce criticism of Mark Fix's stuff. It passed every test and we had great fun playing on it. But there was still more to do to get to the finish line. Back to the monitor at the top here. The original monitor sat in a chassis which was slightly higher than the monitor, the replacement that we bought, and we couldn't just swap over the chassis. They wouldn't fit in that way. So we had to raise up this monitor to be in line with the bezel. We did that with the final offcut of MDF that we'd used to cut for the doors, and a couple of chocks just to lift it up, and it sits perfectly now in the bezel exactly where it should. So that is now securely in place. The screws go all the way through the MDF and the chocks underneath and then into the shelf there. So that is not going anywhere. Very important, because you don't want to tip the cabinet back when you move it around the place and for it to crunch, the CRT to crunch and neck itself. That would be my worst fear, and break itself. So that's super secure in there, as is the main monitor. And then the final detail to finish this all off was to revisit the side art. Now, why are we doing that? Because you saw in a previous episode, we applied vinyl to the whole side here instead of painting it, and that looks wonderful. We applied gorgeous side art, and that looked wonderful. Well, in time, we encountered a few problems, and that's not anything to do with the supplier of the art or anything like that. It's because the intended purpose of the vinyl was to go on wood. But we've applied vinyl to vinyl, and we also applied vinyl to vinyl in a very cold workshop and then brought it up to the warmth of the cave here. And in time, well, look at this. The edges on the vinyl were starting to come unstuck. You can see them bubbling up there. And when you've gone to so much effort on a restoration, little things like that really, really bug you. I'm sure you've all experienced the same thing in your own projects. It was driving me mad. So thank goodness for the return of our hero Dan from Retrofied. We had two ways that we were going to approach this. The first was to apply just a plain black backing, take off the original artwork and then reapply it, and this was going to give it a better surface to adhere to. But what we found was when we took that original artwork off, just as it had been coming up at the sides because of the lack of adhesion there was very little adhesion to the rest of the artwork on the vinyl, and it was never going to stick back down to anything. We were just going to have the same problem again. So what he did instead, he designed from scratch the artwork. He redesigned all of the artwork from scratch, and we've done it in 4 pieces. You've got the black backing, this piece, and this piece, and he's put them all together, and this is super high-tack vinyl. He really knows what he's talking about with this stuff. And ever since its application, there's not been a single sign of edges curling up. It is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And that is not going anywhere now. That is stuck firm. Thank goodness for Dan. It really was driving me crazy, and it's the finishing touch, the icing on the cake, the cherry on the top of this beautiful machine. And I hope you've enjoyed watching the restoration process with us. I hope you've enjoyed seeing the skills that all of the people bring to the Retro Collective here to achieve a restoration like this, and the potential for future restorations. If you've got any suggestions for things that you'd like to see us restore, things that you think belong in a museum that we might be able to turn our hand to restore, I'm all ears. Do let me know. So there it is, the Mega-Tech. Take one more walk around, take one more look at it. And if you'd like to try it for yourself, head to retrocollective.co.uk, where you can book a ticket to come and visit the cave, come and see this, come and have a cup of tea and play some games with me. And that's exactly what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go and put it in situ over there where the old Mega-Tech was. We need to restore that one now, but let's not worry about that for now. We're going to put this in situ, and we're going to let this weekend's visitors play on it, and we're going to finish the restoration on that note, sharing all of our hard work with our visitors here at the museum. If you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe to the channel, as I'm really trying to push on to 200,000 subscribers. We're 30,000 off, so every subscription counts. Please do take a moment to click. And if you really enjoy these restorations and what I do here, head to patreon.com/RMC Retro, where you can support the videos and the museum and everything that we do. See you in the next video.